Hey, welcome to episode 106 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I'm very excited about my guest today. He knows so much about not only history, but how to make history exciting and relevant to now. So, so we can use it to as a lighthouse to guide our lives and our actions as we move forward. Oh, this is going to be so fun. So fun. And I'll be back in just a sec. But for now, the intro, which I forgot the last 2 weeks, but I'm rectifying that right now.
Today's guest, Dr. Michael J. Mullin.
Welcome back to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Freeman. Let me tell you a little about this amazing man I'm having on. He was my Western Civ prof in college, and I was just so struck by how passionate he is about history and about teaching and about life. So let me tell you a little about him. Dr. Michael J. Mullin is a National Endowment for the Humanities chair, a regional heritage at Augustana University in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. A native Californian, Dr. Mullin received his PhD from the University of California, Santa Barbara in American Indian history. He has spent the last 33 years at Augustana University teaching the department's Western Civilization and American History surveys. His work has appeared in numerous publications, most recently in the forthcoming book City of Hustle, which will appear, or has appeared, because it's now October. It came out this month, basically, which is amazing. So, without further ado, please help me welcome Dr. Michael J. Mullin. Yay!
Thank you, Jason. That was a very nice introduction. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. It's just such a privilege and delightful to talk with you.
Well, I would say the privilege is mine. You have done infinitely more things than I have, and many more interesting things than I have done. I have not been a motivational speaker. I have not got to live in San Diego for 10 years. I have not been entrepreneurial enough to get a podcast started. I stand in envy, and an awe is a better word than envy of what you've accomplished.
Thanks, my friend. Speaking of California, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Redondo Beach, Torrance, California, about 30 minutes south of the LA airport. I like to say that I never lived more than a mile from the ocean until I took the job at Augustana.
Then you definitely broke the streak of living a mile from the ocean.
So the people said, "What do you miss about California?" I said, "I miss the ocean." And the first semester I was here, and someone said, "Well, we have a beach, you know." I said, "Oh, really? Where is it?" And they said, "Well, you go out and it's called Wall Lake." And so we're all excited. My wife and I drive out to Wall Lake. You know, it's fall, it's cold. The phosphorus is rushing across the road because it's windy. And I look, and it's not real beach sand. It's kind of rock. And I think, oh my God, we're going to have to teach them what the definition of a beach is. But yeah, so I grew up in Southern California. Went to high school, and as you introduced me, I did my schoolwork at UC Santa Barbara, and so I do consider myself, even after this many years, more a Californian than a South Dakotan.
What do you into? Oh no. First, I want to ask if I had asked the 7-year-old Michael Mullin what he thought he wanted to be when he grew up. What would he have said?
Let's go to third grade, maybe not 7, but third grade. I dressed up as Paul Revere.
No way.
Yeah. My father had transferred back east for a summer. My dad grew up in Philadelphia, so he would try and transfer back east every 4 years for work. And so we spent the summer on the East Coast, and we went to Williamsburg, and we went to the Statue of Liberty, and we went to historical Boston. We went to all these battlefields and stuff. And I loved it. And so as I tell students, when you dress up as Paul Revere for Halloween as a third grader, your career path is pretty much set. You're going to be a historian. So early on. And one of the things, to me, it's been a godsend, okay? But it makes it hard sometimes for when I work with students, because I've never really doubted what I wanted to do. You know, I kind of had a passion for this, for history. And so I kind of had a direction. And as you know, some of your friends at Augie, I see it regularly. They're at school, they're still trying to find what their passion is. And my wife always says, you know, you don't have any idea what it's like for most of us. We have no idea what we wanted to do. And some of us are still trying to find it. And so I kind of feel, from an advising standpoint, sometimes that I'm a terrible advisor, because I don't know what it's like to not know what you want to do. But I try my best and try and help them discover their passion, their interest, what motivates them.
Can you say anything about what's it like to have such a clarity of path for your whole life, or most of it?
Yeah, I would say 80% great. You know, that means, okay, I had this path I was willing to sacrifice, which I didn't think of as sacrifice. You know, when people say, oh, you had so much determination, you did this, you did that, I didn't think about it as determination. It was just what I needed to do to get where I wanted to be. At the same time, the older I get, the more I wish I had taken more time to study a foreign language more deeply, not just think of it as a gen ed that needed to be done. I wish I'd spent more time learning how to write well, not just write. As you know, with the book that you wrote, editing takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it does.
And so having that clarity, I really think was great. But as you look back, I say I didn't pursue certain things that maybe I wish I had pursued now. And that's the downside of it. I didn't explore maybe as well as I might have.
So along with having a career you've known about for the vast majority of your life, and you've been teaching for a long time, how do you keep it fresh? Like, the history of Western civilization does not change from year to year, but how do you teach it with freshness and delight? I mean, you're such a passionate teacher. How do you keep that? Okay, I'll be quiet. I just asked you like 10 questions. Then.
No. I smile because I think it's so easy to keep it fresh, right?
It's so easy.
Yeah, let's take the war in Ukraine. It breaks out last year, and I'm teaching Western Civ 2. And we've been talking in my class about nationalism and how certain groups, certain monarchies in the 19th century, the Habsburgs, for example, the Romanovs in Russia, didn't want nationalism to appear because it would threaten their hold. And now what do we have? We have a leader of Russia who claims that Ukraine's not a nation and belongs to Greater Russia. And so you can look at the events today and say, look at where it's coming from. Here's the Russian perspective. We may not agree with it, but this is what Putin is tapping into when he says Ukraine is not Ukraine. It's a fake state. Here's what the roots of Ukrainian nationalism are, right? Here's where they lie. And so just that lucky issue for me allowed me to, I hope, give my students some insight into how events of the past or ideas of the past can reappear in the present. The other is, I firmly believe that learning history makes the world around you more understandable. And I want people to understand the world around them. I don't want them to agree with me that this is the way history is said or this is what you have to believe. What I want them to have are the tools necessary to evaluate the landscape and come to a reasonable conclusion about what they think the right thing to do is, or what they think the real issues are. And it's important that they have the just kind of basic knowledge and a background and kind of tools for understanding that. And so in that sense, I'm kind of the enthusiasm is that of a zealot. You have to know these things because I want you to understand the world. And I think that kind of drive. I just love history. It's just because I think it explains so much of today.
How does studying history make the world more understandable?
Well, the understanding history explains how we got to today. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, I think that's what history is. It's really not studying the past for the past's sake. What did they expect to have happened with the American Revolution? What did the Civil War produce? Can I understand today's fights about states' rights, about voting rights, about other things without understanding what happened in the past? And then this next step, and I think the most important step, is what does that knowledge, or how does that knowledge shape what I think is going to happen tomorrow, or what I think should happen tomorrow? That is, if I've seen this in the past and I know what the tools were to use to limit voting, how do I stand up to that exploitation today, that denial today? And I think that's the real key. The really good students, they get that. That is, I'm using this to explain today. And I think the greatest compliment a student can give me, and you've given me many good compliments, that you liked my class, that I was exciting, I want those things. But many, many years ago, a nursing student, Susan Olson was her name, gave me the best compliment. She said, Dr. Mullin, I can now watch the news and it makes sense.
Oh, wow.
That is, to me, what history ought to do. And as I say, that far more than I liked your class, I got an A, This student said, look, I understand the news now. I can watch the news now. I am watching the news now because I have a context for what I'm listening to.
And whereas sometimes the experience of the news can be overwhelmed, or we can just not be interested, to have a context to actually look at everything that's going on and put it in some sort of reasonable framework. That's pretty exciting.
It is. And I think we have to acknowledge the news can be overwhelming, right? You're not listening to it makes a lot of sense. My wife says, I just can't take some of this stuff anymore. But in spite of that, the idea that she could watch the news and understand Ukraine, Russia, or could understand East-West at the time the Cold War was just winding down. That's what's important. I'm not asking to watch the news, and I'm not asking people to pay attention to a lot of things, but I do think if you can understand it, you're more likely to pay attention to it.
If you mentioned learning a foreign language a few minutes ago, and your comment, if you can understand it, you're more likely to pay attention to it. Like if I hear a foreign language and have no idea what they're saying, I'll just tune that out. But if it's a major if, because I don't know a foreign language, but if I knew it, I would tune in. And that's what you're saying about history. If we know it and have some understanding, we tune in to a broader range of
yes.
life.
Yes. I will say, though, Jason, I will listen to Hawaiian language, though I don't understand it, almost all the time. I just think it's one of those languages I just want to hear. But there are a number of languages that when I hear it, like you, okay, let's get the English translation. Where are the subtitles?
So much we could talk about. I want to dance between history and then also what you've experienced as a professor and what you see differences you see in your students now versus in the past. So let's go down the teaching road for a minute. How is being a teacher or a college professor different for you today than it was when you started?
There are probably a couple of different ways to answer this, but one, there's a great deal more emphasis today on, say, STEM courses, right? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And there's kind of, I don't want to say a glorification of those disciplines, those areas, but a heavy emphasis. The students are told, these are the areas you need to go into. And the result of that is, though unintentional, a kind of demeaning of the traditional humanities, traditional courses. And the result of that is that students are less likely to think of history or think of English or think of sociology as potential majors, though they might enjoy them. That's one big change. The other is and I guess they're tied together, the two things I'm going to say. There's a lot more consumerism in education today than there was in the past.
What do you mean by that?
That is, in the past, a student would come to Augie and becomes part of the Augustana experience. They're not there to kind of pick and choose what they want to take from it, like they're at a supermarket. They want the experience. They understand that the liberal arts are going to expose them to these things. They're open to exploring those things and perhaps trying on something that they never thought they would do. Now it's more, this is what I want out of my education. I've been told this is what I need, not I want to experience it. And that's what I mean by consumerism. That is, there's less buy-in that where we're headed, that this course is necessary because someone said so. I don't see its relevance, so why do I need to take it? And I think that stems in part from increasing cost of university. That is, I'm paying an awful lot of money to go to university, not just Augustana, but anywhere. And I need to make sure that investment pays off. The other cause of it, I think, is there's growing, not antipathy, but growing distrust of education itself. We see this and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, okay, but the debates over whether you like it or not, the debates over the social science teaching standards in South Dakota, the debates over should there be critical race theory being taught, that is Is it okay to make a student uncomfortable in a discussion over slavery because they don't want to think about the evils of slavery? That makes them uncomfortable. What does that do for my African American students? That we're not going to talk about it because that is this kind of criticism that's aimed often at history, because history is different than myth. We are the ones, right, teaching uncomfortable facts, that Thomas Jefferson had a black mistress, that Abraham Lincoln was not really as egalitarian and as we might like to think, versus myth. And so these are some of the things that have made it different. The other interesting, and it's a trend that's going to continue, is dual credit, at least at the university level. So many high school students, right, are having their American history course transcribed at Mount Marty or at the University of South Dakota. And so students are coming in. I had a student last year, her very first semester, she was technically a junior in college.
What?
She had 60 college credits already under her belt. And she clearly intended to, she was dead set on graduating in 2 years.
Oh.
So she's going to graduate before she's 21. She'll be 20. And then she needs to go to graduate school for the major she had chosen. And so there's not this kind of buy-in. And I can't say, though I know this, graduate schools don't want really young Doogie Housers. They want you to have some experience. They want you to have that kind of maturation process that college produces. And students don't want to hear that. And they think, oh, you just want more money from us. But that's really what graduate schools are after. They want that experienced candidate, that experienced student. They want you to have had some bumps in the road. And so what we have, right, our students graduating quite early, and their attachment to the institution is less than someone who's been here 4 years.
So what's been lost and what's been gained by this new overall student attitude towards higher education?
Let's start with the gained, all right, because I don't think we talk about the gained often enough. I think one of the gains is that faculty do find themselves more responsive to students. That is, having to explain. That is, you should take this course because I'm going to teach you a way to understand the world. Or if you take this course, you'll be able to do X. When you leave here, you'll have Y. That is, and so faculty have to kind of, I don't want to say, I used the word justify, but maybe it's explained to students what they're going to get out of this course, right? So
versus this course is required, so you better come to class.
Yes,
and you better
yes.
pay attention.
Yes. What's been lost, though, I think, is student exploration. I think what's also been lost and most disheartening to me is how important those personal relationships are. If you're here 2 years, I may know you, but I don't know you. If you're here 4 years, I'm likely going to have seen you at very good points and very bad points. I'm going to have a much better idea of your strengths and weaknesses. I have had time to grow empathetic with what you're trying to do. And so it's the kind of personal, deeply personal relationships. I don't remember if you were a junior or senior when I had you as a student, but I do remember, I think it was your first year at Augustana, you took a geography course with Dr. Joel Quam or Professor Joel Quam. And I guest lectured in there. And now don't take this the wrong way, you were uninterested in what I was talking about. And so you kind of...
I was?
You were.
Would I actually ever do that?
Well, this was in your early career, right? And you were just learning the value of actually not of feigning interest as opposed to just. But the point I'm making is, or trying to make, is okay. I had you. One time I saw you in that class. I see you on campus later on. I find out your name. We can begin to talk. We can begin to establish a relationship. We can become ultimately friends. That doesn't happen in a 3-semester college career or a 4-semester college career. And so that's an old fuddy-duddy. That's kind of what's lost, is that that time for personal growth.
How about what impact does being on campus and having living with a community of students have on socials, or what not on, I mean, what impact does it have in general on a student?
We are still primarily a residential campus. We want students on campus. We believe that not all learning takes place in the classroom. And so the ability to master the commons line, the ability to figure out when's the best time to take a shower because it's going to be a mess at 9 o'clock. So I have to go in and, a little before or after. Those are important life skills, not just college skills. So there's that aspect of it. A lot takes place. You know better than I do about Augustana, but when I think about my time in the dorms, I made some really good friends. I had some really good experiences. I found that group of men in my dorm case, became extended family, and they minimized the kind of distance between myself and my nuclear family. What I observe, and I want to make it clear, I've not studied this. I see it though in my first year seminar class. I have 4 students, 5, I guess, that do not live on the dorm. So 5 of 15 are living at home.
Oh.
And they talk about going into class the first day or two and not knowing anybody. So where do I sit? It kind of creates that tension of being 18 and where do I fit in? I don't know anybody. I understand why they live at home. It could be financial. They could have to take care of a sibling. They might have social anxiety, right? There are all types of good reasons for staying at home. But the result is, unless they make extra effort, they're going to be a little bit slower in getting to know their classmates. And so I encourage them to play intramurals. I encourage them to go to extracurricular activities, things that will bring them into contact with those fellow classmates so they can establish those personal relationships.
Powerful. How about what change has when I went to college, we didn't have cell phones. Has the phone changed the dynamic of the classroom in any way, shape, or form?
Yes, for both good and bad. The bad is on me. The good is on the students. But I want to go back to something you asked me early, because how do I keep things fresh? In today's class, I was supposed to be lecturing on Charles Darwin and the question of evolution. And so I asked students to pull out their phones. Now, this is 8 a.m. I hope I don't get in trouble with the parents. And I told them to text their parents. Say, wish them good morning. Say this is a class assignment. And just leave it. And so they did, and they're all kind of smiling. I said, what does this have to do with evolution? And I said, I want you to think about how you text. You all use your thumbs. And now I want you to think how your parents are going to respond. They're all going to use their forefingers and kind of hunt and peck. And they start laughing. And I said, this is evolution, right? The This is in one generation, we've gone from the forefinger being the dominant finger on the hand to the thumb. And we now have the US military having to reconfigure its weapon systems to use the thumb as the trigger finger, not the forefinger, because that's what your dominant finger is. So the phone, going back to that first question, allowed me to teach evolution today. I
What
forget
a tie-in. That's awesome how you tie that together.
Students use their phones as reading material, and this is bad on me. And these are the things that I have to learn. That is, when I see a student get on their phone, I've historically thought they're texting, they're doing this or that. And in class today, in my other class, my first year seminar, I saw a student, I said, do we need the phone? And she said, yes, I'm reading a summary of what we read. I want to make sure I understood it correctly. She was using her phone right to read not the assignment, but a summary of the assignment. And that's when I see students picking out their phone. So I try to remember, I don't often, but I try to remember to ask students, okay, who's reading what on their phone? So that I know when you're looking at your phone, you're not goofing off, you're actually doing something that's class related. Because too often I call on a student and say, you really shouldn't be on your phone. And then she holds it up and says, well, I was actually reading. And now I've made her feel bad. I'm a jerk because I wasn't contemporary enough to know that. And so you just have to be aware of it. My colleagues use it for what they call poll everywhere. And it's an easy way to allow class discussion, very quick discussion on a topic. So you put a poll up there, use poll everywhere. Students pull out their phone, answer yes, no, 1, 2, 3, if it's a multiple choice. And then now you can have real-time discussion.
No way. I've never seen that in a classroom.
Yeah. And so the phone has changed a lot of what we do, how we do it, for good. And yes, students are tied to their phone. I do have a rule, and the students love this. I've had to pay twice so far. If your phone goes off in class and it's not from the university about some issue, you have to bring treats for the whole class.
Oh, bring treats. How fun is that?
And so one day this semester, I got a text from my daughter that went off in the middle of class. She's engaged to be married next year. And she said, Dad, I need you to start thinking about a father-daughter dance. Have you given any thought? And I just thought, you just cost me $40 because it's going to be $40 to get 24 bagels, cream cheese for the class now. And so the phone can be, from my student perspective, it can be really beneficial because Mullin's bringing bagels or donuts, 3 times a semester.
Nice. You mentioned when we had coffee that having me as a student inspired you to redefine what student success meant.
Absolutely.
Or start to think about that. How so?
In so many ways. Success up until you showed up and maybe a few other students, but success to me in my mind had always been preparing a student for graduate school. That is my goal, right? Was to get you going down, and not you, Jason Freeman, but you, the student, to be thinking about graduate school, to be thinking about beyond. Maybe because I loved graduate school and I loved academia so much. I mean, I thought that should be what success, that would define success for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But you, as a student, I can still see your handwriting. And
one of my friends saw me write for the first time, and he said, you write like a serial killer or something.
Well, you took a little bit. You required a little more time for test. You needed things explained, just so we could make sure we got it. You wanted to know what I had to do for this test, and what I'm learning from you as a student, right, is that I need to be clear. I need to make sure students understand the assignment. I need to make sure that a student who gets a C, that may be and I'm not saying you did, a student who gets a C, that may be the best they do. They've never had a history course. And for all your football coaches listening, my pet peeve is that history is always taught by athletic coaches. It's not taught by historians. So they've never had someone who's just hired to teach history. And so you didn't come from this, but I've had students after you who have come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And the idea that they would know basic American history or basic Western Civ is an assumption that I shouldn't be making. And so I have to take students where they are. That's the key, right? That's really what you taught me. I may want you to write the best PhD dissertation ever, but you may not be able to if you don't have the background or you've not been introduced to some of the concepts that we're talking about. And so one of the things that your presence in the classroom taught me is to pay attention to where students are. What do they need to be successful? Not how am I defining success? What do they need to be successful? And can I give them those tools? I would like to think I can give students those tools without diminishing the quality of my course. I'd like to think. I was hired by a gentleman that had retired, I think, before you came to Augustana, Linwood Hoyos. And Lynn Hoyos was, this legendary figure at Augustana. And I had an office in our old building where I could listen to him lecture. And I would listen to him lecture and I'd say, okay, here's what the C student, every student's going to get this from the class. Here's what the B student's going to get out of this. Here's what the A student's going to take from it. And he did it without students saying, oh, this is over my head. Oh, I don't understand this. It was, in my case, listening to a peer saying who knew the subject. Oh, that's just brilliant the way you do that. What I would hope is that my lectures in some way mirror what Linwood Hoyos could do, so that my weakest student is picking up enough to feel I'm learning something, I can do the test, I can be successful in this course. And that my best student can say, I'm leaving here knowing something more than I did, that I am being challenged. And the two are doing the same thing. The two have the same expectations. But my expectations for what I should expect differs between the two. They don't need to know that my expectations are a little bit different. They need to know that they've been treated fairly, that they've been treated in a way that the goal is to get them to understand the material.
What does this discussion have to do with the broader idea of how we define success in our own lives? Because so often we start something new, like playing basketball or something, and we look at some star and say, I can't do that. I must not be good at basketball, but...
You stopped in 6th grade.
Yeah.
I did read that. I thought was, but that post you made, right, kind of gets at least a little bit at what I hope I'm saying. If you were a 6th grader, you might not be great in basketball, but what you need is a coach that's going to recognize the improvement, that's going to recognize the effort, that's going to say, you have a role to play, right? So success for Jason Freeman on the 6th grade basketball team might be coming out for the 7th grade team. But for LeBron James, success is going to be, is there a high school that's going to recruit me, and come to my games as a 7th grader and begin talking to me about what they can do to get me to the next level? I would hope that both just getting a kid to try out again for the 7th grade team and having a superstar be recognized by high school coaches who are salivating over that talent, that both would be recognized as success.
As a teacher, like, so you're teaching complex, nuanced subject matter, and you're trying to figure out how to basically deliver 3 different messages to the students in the class, depending on what they will pick up. How do you do all that?
Trial and error, I think, is part of it. I jokingly tell new faculty that you spend the first 3 years of your teaching career thinking, I've got to teach everything there is in Western Civ. We're going to cover every single event, every single fact, right? And so
That's so overwhelming.
Yes. So we've got this big, fat human body, that's there, this cadaver. And you spend the rest of your life slicing off pieces of flesh to get to a skeleton. What is the least amount of material that I can keep that will hold together so that we can all understand what we're trying to do? And that's really, that's where I think the art of teaching comes.
Oh, wow.
I think so. Going back to the Darwin lecture today, what students don't, I have a lecture, you may remember it, on the creation of the modern factory system. And I used Josiah Wedgwood, and Wedgwood created this factory at Troria. That's neither here nor there. Charles Darwin is the grandson of Josiah Wedgwood. And it was the wealth of the Industrial Revolution that Wedgwood created that allowed Charles Darwin to go on the HMS Beagle. So
I love how you make all these connections.
Well, and I don't expect students to, but what I want to show them, right, is here's a case where the Industrial Revolution produced all this wealth. Charles Darwin can go on this voyage because he's wealthy and considered a gentleman now. And because he's a gentleman, he's able to do the science. He would never have been able to do the science if he'd been the scientist on the HMS Beagle. And so what I try to do is connect these various snippets, these various stories, in a way that students can put their own skeleton together so that they can, and that great student, that kid that's going to go to Harvard and get a PhD, they may actually put on a whole cadaver. But underneath that cadaver, that kid that's just trying to pass and prove to himself or herself that I can do this, they've created the skeleton. They have the same skeleton. And both have been successful. Both have done what's been asked.
I never thought about this per se, but when students come out of your class, or probably me too, like, we knew how to connect the stories of in our lives a little better because we had seen you.
I hope so.
With it.
I hope so, but both you and I are no longer in our 20s. We'll just put it that way. And one
beyond. I am.
One of the questions that we ask among historians, my colleagues and I, how often do we hear someone say, "Oh, I love history now. I hated it when I was in school." How much of that kind of hard learning that we've done, how much of the lived experience shapes a growing appreciation for history? I hope students can put it together. I expect them to put it together, but I think sometimes we maybe expect a little too much from an 18, 19, 20-year-old. Have they had the life experiences yet that are going to prepare, that allow them to see how they fit precisely? They're going, our students across the nation go through so many transformations. Who am I as a person? Right? Where do I fit in? How do I deal? And if you were to take COVID, right? I feel I should get a shot, but my family doesn't want to. How's that going to deal with the dynamic of my family? I think sometimes we don't give students enough credit for muddling through, for doing the best they can, and then allowing them to figure it out a little bit later. When they figured out who they are, when they figured out what their identities are, when they figured out what they think they want to do for the future. As you know, I have tremendous faith and great hope and confidence in those that come behind me. When I work with college students, and I'm sure you find this when you do your motivational speaking, you leave feeling invigorated. You feel that the world is in good hands. You know that there are going to be problems, but I get so angry at people who say, oh, the world is going, the next generation's not going to do it as well. They need to be told what to do. No, let them figure out who they are. Let them get their feet on the ground. If we've done our job right as historians, as parents, as others, they'll make decisions that are meant to be for the best interest of themselves and most people. And so I have, what the history does teach me, right, is hope. We can talk about 1,000 disasters, and yet we're still here. And so I maybe I've taken this in the wrong direction, Jason, but I do think that when they leave, they are thinking. I hope they're thinking. But part of my job, since it's a 100 level course, right, is to break that cycle of, oh, I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention. And so calling on them and asking them, trying to get them to think is part of that transition from passive student to active learner. And I hope my class feels a safe place for them to answer, to try and do that, even if they're not history majors.
Speaking of hope for the future, what would you say to someone who just kept listing thing after thing that's going wrong today, and say, look, see, professor, this is bad. See, this is bad. See, this is bad. What would you say?
You're right. But there has to be a but there somehow, right? I jokingly say to some students, be grateful that the generation in front of you introduced unleaded gasoline to help clean air. Be grateful that they passed the Environmental Protection Agency, the Wilderness Protection Act. That is, these were small steps, big steps that seemed really important at the time. It didn't solve the problem. We still have these problems of global warming and other things. But before that, right, we had problems as well. We're always going to have problems. We're never going to have a perfect system. Be creative. You don't like this. Be creative. What can we do? What do we need to do? What would you like to see changed? Can I use my daughter as an example?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. This is a great story.
So my daughter did a master's degree in forced refugee migration studies, and the thesis dealt with American or United States food policy in times of disaster. And what she found was that American policy actually exacerbates famine and crisis, because what happens is we require the USAID, the United States Aid for International Development, we require USAID personnel to distribute American-grown food, corn and wheat, right? It's part of the food, part of the farm package. What all the research indicates when we bring in that food is we undercut local farmers, local producers, and now they can't sell their goods, and now they're in desperate situation. What we ought to be doing is buying the local crop and supplementing it with the American grown food, so we can keep those local farmers employed. We can get them producing, not make them part of the refugee crisis. My hope
Makes sense.
is that her generation is willing to stand up and say, this is better. This model will help more people. I think it's good that the United States provides that aid. I think it's good, right, that we are good enough citizens that we say we have extra food, we'll feed you. But we've discovered some downside with it. So that's what I would hope. Yes, we have some problems. We're going to have problems. We know some solutions. Can you fix them? If you can, you're doing better than we are. But understand your kids are going to say, why did you leave the world this way when they're your age? Have some humility.
You the issue you bring up brings to mind another thing I learned at Augie Public, that complex situations and complex problems are not utterly black and white. Like it's good that the United States is giving aid, but just the way it's distributing aid could be modified and could be made way more humane. So,
Yeah.
what would you say about seeing issues as more complex and not as black and white?
We love, and I'll just show my age. I'll blame TikTok for this, right? We love the quick soundbite. TikTok's going to say the 30-second news cycle does this as well. And so we want things broken down, right? But they're not. Almost no issue is black and white. And we have to accept nuance. We have to, and I like that word that you used. We have to use complexity. Accept nuance, accept complexity. And we have to be honest and say, sometimes we're going to make the wrong decision. We're going to think that we have the right answer and it's not correct. So we have to have some humility. But I'm always leery, and I try and teach my students, and I try and teach history this way, that the simple answers probably are not the correct answers. That is, the Civil War was not just one issue brought on by one issue, but by many. World War II was not just one issue, but many. And we have to be willing to bring into account the many. And sometimes that will make us uncomfortable.
We don't like not knowing the answer.
We do not like uncertainty. That's right. That's right. I think academics can live with it a little more easily than many people, because that's our world, right? Is, am I right? Am I wrong? That is, I'm fighting someone else, ideas of someone else. Will history prove me right or wrong? And I would have done this when you were a student. The last class that I always give, right? I talk about hope and how the future is bright because of you. But one of the things that I hope history would teach our students is modesty and humility. That is, think of when we look back in the 19th century, the 18th century, we say, how stupid could they have been? They believed this. And I ask students to say, what do you think they're going to say about us in 200 years? What stupid thing do we hold true today? And we don't know. We can't know. But they're going to look back at us and say, what idiots they were for believing this. And if we can kind of keep that idea that nothing is a given, we tend to be a little bit more modest, a little bit more humility, have a little more humility, and kind of approach the answers to the problems, I think, a little bit more honestly. And I think that's true not just in history, but in almost any subject.
This is a perfect segue into something I ask every guest. So I talk in my work about the power of doing our imperfect best. And what it means to me is that we have the freedom to envision the best that our lives can be, how we can make a difference, how we can fulfill our dreams, how we can know joy. And doing your imperfect best means that when mistakes come up, when obstacles come up, instead of going, see, I made that mistake, I might as well just stop doing that thing. We learn from that mistake and move forward towards the best we envision. That's what imperfect best means to me. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you, Dr. Michael J. Mullin?
I think it's coming to grips with the lived experience versus what you dreamed your career might be at the beginning.
Well said.
I remember sitting in the Augustana Commons in June of 1988, looking around. I was a very late interview, looking at the green and asking myself two questions. The first question is, okay, so if they offer you the job and you come, how soon until you leave? This is not a Research One institution. You're not going to build your name as an academic researcher at this place. It's the Midwest. It's not California. It's more than a mile from the ocean, right? How soon until you leave? And the next thought was, is this a place you could stay if you had to? And I'm happy to say Augustana is a place I chose to stay at. I had a chance to leave. I chose not to. I chose not to because of the students. I chose not to because of the colleagues. But it means, right, that I'm not the most prolific historian. I'm not being asked on national public radio, what do I think about this topic or about that topic? I haven't lived the life of a famous academic the way my advisor did and my committee members did. And that when I started, that was what I envisioned. And so my imperfect perfect is coming to grips with what I have done and being satisfied with that. And I think that's maybe what you're getting at, right? It's not just, it's being satisfied, acknowledging that you did the best you could do. You did what you wanted to do. You learned from what you were doing and saying that's enough. Not lamenting what you didn't do.
It's striking me as you say it, so much of any of our quality of life depends on us being satisfied with what we do, with how we live, with the decisions we make.
Oh, yes, and let's be honest. Look at me. I'm an academic, right? I have a job that most people would love to have. I don't have bosses yell at me constantly. I've got freedom to choose what I'm writing, what I'm doing. It's easy for me to say, you should do what you love. But it is being satisfied. I'm never going to get rich teaching at Augustana, right? I could double my salary by going to a state school in South Dakota. But there's something here that is more intrinsically more important to me than simple dollars. And so, yes, I think you're right. It's that balance of life. I can have a family life. I can not be on call 24 hours a day. I can carve out some free time. And those things matter. And I hope they matter for everybody, because what I want, and maybe this comes from my training in American Indian history, right, is not all cultures are acquisitive. Not all cultures say those that accumulate the most are the most successful, the most important. And I think sometimes we need to recalibrate some of that acquisitiveness, whether it's intellectual or material.
I meant to ask you early on about your PhD and how you chose American Indian history and all that, and the conversation went in a different profound direction, but I'm so glad you brought that in at the end.
Well,
Because
it's like I knew you wanted me to talk about it so we could get it in.
awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's it's been so uplifting getting a chance to interview you and share your experience and your perspective and all the connections you make and your hope with my listeners or with the awkwardly awesome podcast listeners. They're not my listeners, they're listeners of the podcast. So thank you so much.
Jason, it's been my pleasure, and I can't tell you how happy I am that you're back in South Dakota. We used to only meet in the airport at Christmas time, head into our various places. It's just been a great experience, and I am really happy that you're back in South Dakota because I think that you and the work you're doing with Awkwardly Awesome podcast, with the writing, with the motivation, makes our region much better. And really, what I like symbolically, maybe is the best way to put this, right? It's reverse brain drain. I went to the coast, I've come back. And so the future for the state of South Dakota with young people, and I know you're going to say you're not that young, but you're young to me, with young people is really important. I can make a living. I can do these things. I can be entrepreneurial. There is a future in South Dakota if you want to make it. And in that sense, you are a great ambassador for the state of South Dakota.
Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, my friend.
Thank you. It's good to see you, and we'll have coffee soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye. Oh my goodness. My goodness. We can so easily put the people around us in boxes. Oh, I'm related to him or her, or he's a friend, and I do this with him. I do this with her, but in this case, this man's my teacher. We only relate in this way, but in those boxes are sometimes needed. And also, there's a whole universe of conversation we can have with the people around us beyond those boxes. As I keep saying, ask the questions you want to ask of the people around you. Ask creative questions. Listen, ask follow-up questions. And you'll just be amazed how much richer your life becomes. At least that's what I find. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Next week, next week, my guest is Douglas Houken. I think that's how you say his last name. And Doug's amazing. He was an interior designer, go in the heart of his career, and he decided to go back to school and become a fifth grade math teacher, and just so much amazement. So tune in next week. For now, thanks for being you. Have a great night.